while it's good and you want restored relationship with your spouse, the spouse ultimately can't be the end goal of this. The end goal has to be restored relationship with the Father.
If you don't know who you are in God and I don't know who I am in God, we're kind of we're going to fail one way or the other.
I mean, the truth is, you're constantly being told things either by the Lord or by the enemy, right? And who are you going to listen to? You're going to listen to the father of lies, or are you going to listen to the Creator?
Welcome to Hope Reforged, the podcast where we champion married couples from pornography addiction to a life of freedom, restoration, and unity. We know the road can be tough, but we're here to walk it together. It's time to break free from the chains of fear and shame. Experience Hope Reforged.
Part of the balance that we want to bring to this podcast is to not just point out all the steps that need to be taken, the trials,
The ugly part.
But also the victory part. And regardless of how the spouse reacts, regardless of how many times, the addict falls or, I think we have to come back to identity. And where our identity is found, what it is, because I think when the enemy of our souls gets our focus on the wrong thing, and he makes us feel like we're going to be stuck here forever.
Sure.
This is never going to change. All those lies can start seeping in. But if we turn our thoughts back to what God has promised, what God has said, what he has called us to from before the foundations of the earth, then all of that comes into perspective of, okay, this is a blip. It's a significant blip, but we will get past this, and there's more to come. There's a future, and there's a hope.
Fix your eyes on the hope and the prize so you can run the race. Yeah. Just like what Paul wrote about. And so I think just let's remind ourselves and everybody who's listening about what our identity is, because this is a battle that we're in, and man, it can get tiring. So I want this to be an encouraging session, and maybe it's something that we go back and listen to ourselves again and again, because no matter where you are in life, we need to remember what God's promises are. So, lay it on me.
Let's lay out the freedom that is at the finish line. It just I don't know that it can be described very well, but the freedom. Do you remember a time where you looked around and you were just like, oh, wait, I'm not being tempted as much as I used to, or I feel a lot stronger in saying no to that temptation?
I wish I could say there were individual points along the way where you kind of realize that. I think for me it was kind of like, you've crossed the finish line, and you kind of look around and it's like, oh, I'm here, right? There were times in the process where it's like, oh, normally I would have been tempted to go do this, or I would have fallen back into this thought process, and it just becoming new habits, but it's, for me, it was a little bit more seamless. I think a little bit more like I wasn't even cognizant that was going on. And then while it was for us several years, kind of, to a certain degree, it's almost like you wake up one day and, then you're kind of there.
I would say it was the same for me. All of a sudden I realized, oh, I don't hate him. Well,
okay.
Actually, one good thing's for my husband.
Yeah.
I'm not plotting his demise. Okay. That's a good place to be.
It is a good thing.
Yeah.
So the victory, I would say it does come suddenly, but it is coming. It is on the horizon.
Yeah.
You may not realize it, and I think the way that we got there was purely saying yes to God. I can't take credit for jack squat. I cannot.
Mm.
But I look at, how God led me through the whole path. I just kept saying yes to him. Okay. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Yeah. For me, one of the big pivotal points for me was the dealing with one of my big father wounds, which was kind of an interesting story because it was actually, I was at a John Eldridge retreat.
He wrote
Wild at Heart.
Wild at Heart. Yeah.
Wild at Heart, among other
many books.
Yep. But he puts on these men's conferences, and I was at one. And it was actually my second one. And he was talking about during the conference, they do sessions where he gets up and they speak and they show movie clips. And then you have, lunch breaks and other things. It's I think a 3-day conference usually is what it was. And at the beginning of the conference, he got up and said, okay, this time we've got to have counselors in the lunchroom. So if you start to deal with stuff and you're not sure what's going on, you got all these feelings come up, you got somebody to talk to. And I thought, man, that's great. Because he would show like gladiator clips and stuff, and I'd start crying and I didn't know why.
Wow.
There was just stuff going on. There was heart issue stuff going on. And I wasn't connecting the dots. Right. So it's like, okay, well, I'll have somebody to talk about this. And so I was, looking forward to that, and of course they showed some clip again and I'm bawling in the middle of it. And as are a lot of guys, and so I go up to the counselor during lunch. It's like, hey, John said we come talk to you. Here's what's going on. And I started, and there's this reaction. Like, can I talk to you about this? And he's like, well, why don't you go and why don't you pray about it? And then we'll come back. And if you need to talk about it with me, you can. And at that point in time, I just got really upset because, and what it did in reality was it touched this wound where I came to my dad at one point and asked him, hey, I'm having trouble. Can you help me out? And I don't think it was his intention, but he kind of, my interpretation of his response was that he kind of blew me off, which is just kind of the same thing as what this counselor did, right? Where I'm asking for help and he just kind of blew me off. Oh, why don't you go talk to God about it? Is how I took it, and I got really ticked at the guy first, but then I also got depressed. And there's this whole range of emotions. And then all of a sudden I started thinking about it. And I realized that the emotions that I was feeling when the counselor did that were the same emotions I was feeling with my dad when I was looking for help for a specific problem. And so I went through this whole, and I was just like, at that point, I'm just like, I'm done with the conference. I'm out, and I'm just in my room and I'm just grieving this whole thing that I didn't get to really grieve, or I only, as a teenager, I just kind of grieved, as the wound, but I didn't really get to really process it. So I had this time where I was processing it. And then what was cool is the Lord after that, I went on a hike and the Lord was like with me on that hike. He was telling me,
you could sense
I could sense he was we were just walking together and we were on this hike together and we were climbing up the mountainside and he was telling me, pick up this rock and this is what this rock means. And, all this cool stuff. And at the end of it, he's like, look, the parts where your dad wasn't there for you, I'm going to be there for you and I'm going to be your father, and he just reinforced that. And I just heard it so clearly.
Today's episode of Hope Reforged is brought to you in part by C12, a nationwide mentoring framework of transformation for Christian business leaders. Find community at joinc12.com.
And I was on this, both literally and emotionally on this high, because I was in a high place in Colorado, not because I was on drugs or anything, but just wanted to be clear with that. I was on this high, this emotional high, and literally in a high place, mountaintop experience. So came back down to the conference, and as I'm coming into the session, I think I skipped a couple, and they're talking about how God's going to be your father, and it was just like, okay, well, I just went and had that, so I know exactly what they're talking about. So this is a really cool experience where God got to kind of lead me through this healing process of that wound. And I got to, have that thing restored.
Which is why Jesus came to the earth, was to restore us to the Father.
Yeah.
And that is the foundational relationship.
Yeah.
That is the number one. It's not the marriage. And we're here, we're huge fans of marriage.
Yeah.
Obviously, we're trying to, encourage marriages and,
Mm-hmm.
but who am I if I am not married? I need to know that. And you need to know that.
Yep.
You need to know that.
Yes.
Because if you don't know who you are in God and I don't know who I am in God, we're kind of, we're going to fail one way or the other.
So if you think about Genesis, right, when Eve...
Let me say, I said we were going to fail one way or the other. The enemy will easily take us out.
Yeah. 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 You can stay in a broken place, and not receive the healing and the fullness that God has for you.
You start talking about Adam and Eve.
So, where I was going...
Interrupted.
Yeah. No, that's fine.
Again.
That's okay. This is a conversation. So with Eve, where she, when the original temptation was brought into the garden, when Eve was partaking of that, I think Adam made a conscious choice. He's sitting there watching her do this thing that God said don't do, and she's being lied to, and she's buying the lie, and she's entering into the sin, and he's sitting there watching her. I think to a certain degree, Adam was making a conscious decision of, well, I know she's doing what the Lord said not to do, and there's going to be a consequence of this, but I would rather not be away from her. So he was, in a sense, choosing his wife over God, right? And so I think...
Which is a form of worship.
And so I think there's a place of realizing as you're walking through this, that while it's good and you want restored relationship with your spouse, the spouse ultimately can't be the end goal of this. The end goal has to be restored relationship with the Father. You have to make that choice that I'm going to choose God over my spouse, and I've got to restore that relationship first. And that restoring relationship with my wife, if my wife is willing to partner with that, or my spouse is willing to partner with that, is, secondary. It's important, but it's really secondary to that primary relationship that you have to restore, which is with God first.
100%. And I know this is going to come as a major shock to you, but I cannot heal you. I can be a partner with God in your healing process.
Okay.
He can heal you all by himself. He doesn't need me to do that.
Yeah.
I can just come alongside him and...
Well, how can I fix you? that's not my job. You can't fix me. I can't fix you.
Fixing?
Sometimes. We all need fixing to a certain degree, don't we?
All right. Yeah. No, that's good. But the number one goal is our restoration, our full restoration to Father God. Then we can, then you and I can be restored. So it was interesting though, when God came to him and said, "Hey, where are you?
Yeah.
Who told you?
Who told you these things?"
He started, and the Father knew fully what was going on, but Adam's response was interesting.
Well, it's and I think it's a very typical guy thing. It's kind of part of our makeup is, that whole, if I can't deny, then I'm going to blame, right? I'm going to point the finger other places. Well, God, this wife that you gave me, none of this is my fault. These are the circumstances that happened. So, I was just kind of totally innocent here. And, these justifications, these lies you tell yourself, I think John Eldridge talks about, putting on the fig leaf, basically, to cover up your own culpability in the situation. So, we talked a lot last time, when you had your episode where it was, you were coming face to face with some of the emotion of the betrayal, and you were expressing that. You had that one time where
very loudly.
Yeah. Blah, and you were unloading, and I was like, yeah, you're right, and you have the opportunity to let Christ come in and remake you, right? And so you can either choose to be, the Adam, the false Adam, and deal with those. Well, no, it's not my fault because of this. I'm not to blame,
It's
or
my
you,
wounds. It's my
right.
Yep.
Or
past.
you can say, no, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to accept responsibility. I did do wrong. I did do bad here, but at the same time, also realizing that you're not bad, right? I'm not bad. I may have done bad, but I'm not bad.
And that's why we're talking about God's promises today and what's on the other side of the finish line. And I mean, everything that we're talking about, this journey really is it does require courage, a lot of courage. So we are encouraging.
Encouraging the courage?
Yes, we're encouraging to promote courage. I want to read a little. I had a counselor recently.
What is that book?
Recommend a book to me. It's interesting. It's by Dale Mast.
Uh-huh.
And David perceived he was king. So it was about King David in the Old Testament, and about how his life is really reflected in ours. And page 26, I wanted to read just a couple sentences that have to do with our identity, our true identity. Let me find it here. Yep. The way we see ourselves is crucial to our destiny. The way we perceive ourselves is crucial to our destiny. God knows what we think and what we say about ourselves is so central to his call on our lives. Until we speak what he has spoken about us, we will not impact the earth with heaven.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I know a lot of people are listening to us who are saying, but you don't know what I've done. You don't know what I've thought, what I've wanted to do. You don't know what,
I've been through.
Yeah, what I've been through. And it's true. But God wants to paint a different picture for you.
Yeah.
And so when he hears you speak the truth about yourself, you come into agreement with him, and then he can bring that about.
Yeah.
We have to agree with him.
Yeah.
He's not going to force something on us. This is deep stuff, but man, I just really hope that people walk away from this podcast with so much more courage that they know that regardless of how their spouse reacts to their confession or what they've done, that it's still true what God says, who they are. It's still, nothing can change that. Nothing can. The enemy of our souls may want us to believe that everything's changed, that God has given up, that God has changed his mind about who we are, that, what he said before the foundations of the earth were formed about you is not true today.
Yep.
But I'm pretty sure that God's eternal, and what he spoke before the foundations of the earth is still echoing throughout time. And so it's still consistent. It's still a true story.
We want to, because of our human framework, we want to put God in a box and relate to him on ways that we can wrap our head around, right? Which means that, we tend to, we have a very linear timeline existence, the future is always moving forward steadily at an even pace. You can't go back and redo something. You can't go forward. God doesn't, I like to think of our, for those people who know what VHS is, I like to think of God like the guy, with the remote control, able to rewind and fast forward the VHS, basically rewind and fast forward the movie. of our lives to any point, and see things. So the point I'm making with that is God is never surprised, that you're going to make a decision or do something, right? And so, I mean, when he offers you, the salvation, and he offers you, to be his son, and that's his promise to you, that he's going to be your father, you're going to be his son, through Jesus. He doesn't ever come back and rescind that. He doesn't change his mind. Oh, well, now he's done this. Forget it. All bets are off. He's not like, wow, I didn't know that was going to happen. That's not, we just, I think sometimes we just try to relate to God in our own human understanding and our own perception of things. And that's not who he is,
Again, it's the parable of the rebellious son, the prodigal son, who, when he was running toward, when the father was running toward his son, who he had been separated from for so long, his son smelled like a pig, was covered with pig crap. The father still embraced him fully. Big old bear hug. And that's still what the Father is doing today for us. And let me just, one side note, whenever the Bible talks about sonship and us becoming his son, that word son is humankind. It is not relegated only to the male side of the species. So I think, again, back to knowing his what our identity is, our eternal identity, is really crucial. Please do check out this book. And David Perceived He Was King. It was such a life-changing book. So I think let's go through what we should say and what we should think about ourselves. What is God talking to us about? And I believe that some of the people who are listening they're going to have vision. Without vision, the people perish. And so once this soaks in to our hearts, we have vision. So the first verses I'm going to read are out of Psalms 1, verses 1 through 3. What delight, and this is the Passion Translation, my favorite. Okay. What delight comes to the one who follows God's ways. He won't walk in step with the wicked, nor will he share the sinner's way. He won't be found sitting in the scorner's seat. His passion is to remain true to the word of Jehovah, I am. His passion is meditating day and night on the true revelation of light. He will be standing firm like a flourishing tree, planted by God's design, deeply rooted by the brooks of bliss, bearing fruit in every season of life. He is never dry, never fainting, ever blessed and ever prosperous.
You can take scriptures like this one of two ways. You can either see them as this is a standard that I've got to try and live up to, or you can take it as this is a promise the Lord is giving me about who he's transforming me into. And I for a long time took a lot of these scriptures about, how to live my life as this is what I've got to strive to accomplish, right? And it turned it into a performance thing. And when I had the revelation that this was not about something I've got to accomplish, but this is something about what God is going to accomplish in me. This is what his goal is. This is where he's moving me towards. This is not I'm putting down a road for you to lead on your own. I'm giving you a promise of where your journey is going to be, what you're going to be someday, and I mean, do we fully get there? I don't know. I mean, those are conversations you need to have with God and figure out for yourself. But I do believe that the way I look at it now is that when I read these scriptures, it's not about something I have to live up to. This is about God saying, this is who I'm making you.
This is how he sees us.
This is how he sees us.
He sees us as a flourishing tree, fruitful. I mean, that's why he's made us in his image. Again, that hasn't changed.
I had somebody, as we were giving a teaching one time with another group, somebody got up and gave this example. He said, I've got my son, who's older now, and he comes over to the house and he does projects for me, and he cleans things up, and repairs my house and does all this stuff. And he goes, but when he was a baby, that there was messes and diapers and screaming and yelling and calamities that happened.
Very needy,
right? And he said to the group, he goes, "When did I love my son more?" Right? And the answer was, there was no, I didn't love him more when he was younger. I didn't love him more when he was older. I loved him the same throughout the whole thing.
Wow, that's good.
And I think we have to understand that that's, in a shadow, a perspective of the way that God has us. Sometimes we're messy and needy and immature and we have problems, and, God doesn't love us any less because of that, and then there's a promise about who we're going to be someday. And that's kind of, something to keep in mind. Speaking of which, again, my coffee cup here. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. Jeremiah 29:11.
Yeah.
So again, God has promises, and God knows who we were from before we were conceived, and had plans for us, and knew what we were going to wrestle with, knew what we were going to turn into eventually. There's something important to keep in mind in all this. And then I guess I will also read Romans 12:2, which I think is a fantastic scripture. So,
it is. You chose wisely.
This is so
good job.
So relevant to today. And I'm also going to read from your favorite translation, the Passion Translation. And it says, "Stop imitating the ideals and opinions of the culture around you." Holy smokes, do we need that today, right? "But be inwardly transformed by the Holy Spirit through a total reformation of how you think. This will empower you to discern God's will as you live a beautiful life, satisfying and perfect in His eyes." And again, this is not a commandment of go out and make this happen. This is a promise about what He is doing in your life. So, yeah, that's just, it totally changes how you perceive these sort of scriptures when you take it that way, because it's just so encouraging then to know that this is what God is doing, and it's not your responsibility to do it. It's His responsibility to do it. You just have to partner with Him in the process.
Continue to say yes.
Mm-hmm.
There's one of the episodes that you talked a lot about how the brain functions in an addiction cycle.
Yep.
And again, we know stories of people being instantly healed, their mind being transformed.
Mm-hmm.
But we're also promised the mind of Christ, and so I think that's a promise that we can stand on. And you can declare over yourself, like I can stand in front of my mirror every morning while I'm brushing my teeth and say, well, maybe not while I'm brushing my teeth, but I can say, I've been given the mind of Christ.
Yeah.
I'm being transformed.
Yeah.
So again, back to what I just read earlier from Dale Mast's book, God knows that what we think and say about ourselves is crucial. It's also good to not just remind ourselves, but also to remind the enemy.
Yeah. I mean, the truth is you're constantly being told things either by the Lord or by the enemy, right? And who are you going to listen to?
Yes.
You're going to listen to the father of lies, or are you going to listen to the Creator who made you and knew you?
So I think it's important for the listeners to know that we're praying for them.
Yeah.
I am excited about what's happening in their lives. I think it's these are seeds that are being planted. Whoever is watching this or listening to this, it's timely. It's a timely word.
It's not a mistake you're listening to this now.
Yeah, exactly. Be of good courage. There's one more verse I want to read, then we can close out. Philippians 4. This is another promise. Again, this is not what you're doing in your strength, but it's a promise from the Lord. Keep your thoughts continually fixed on all that is authentic, real, honorable, admirable, beautiful, respectful, pure, holy, merciful, and kind. and fasten your thoughts on every glorious work of God, praising Him always. Please put into practice the example of all that you're hearing from us, all that you're seeing in our lives, and the God of peace will be with you in all things.
Thank you for joining us on Hope Reforged. Together, we can break the chains of addiction and rebuild hope. To stay connected, visit us at www.hopereforged.com, where you'll find new episodes, resources, and support. If you found this helpful, please leave us a review and share it with someone who would be encouraged by this podcast. Until next time, persevere, lean into hope, and remember that restoration is yours.